When we spoke earlier, you said there hasn't yet been a seminal moment and you didn't expect there to be one. Here we are now. Was there a moment that stuck with you?
I don't see that we had a seminal moment. You might remember I also said that I thought anytime you can get information out to the public about wrongdoing, it would be a good thing. I think we were able to accomplish this. There was much to be shared with the public, a public that may not have been as attuned to what's been going on as I have been. But I don't think we had the seminal moment where we would have that wow moment. I think that we've known what Mr. Mueller shared today. It's been in his report. And my contention has always been that we didn't need the hearing to start the impeachment process. I think that what we've shared today has been good, but we didn't need it for the impeachment process. He can still be impeached, and he should be impeached.
What I've been hearing from a lot of members of Congress is those of you who have read the report, you were carrying the report around with you today. That's not what the American public is doing. Most people have not looked into this as deeply as you have. So for the average American, was there an impact today?
Well, I'm going to believe that there were a good many people who did not know that the president had not been exonerated because the president has said he's been exonerated. So I think that was beneficial.
This contradicted the president's words.
It contradicts what he has been preaching. It's a false gospel, and I think people were able to hear Mr. Mueller refute that. I think also the notion that the president can be prosecuted later on. I think that was important for people to know when he leaves office. But I also think it's important for people to know that the framers of the Constitution intended for a president to be removed from office by way of impeachment and then prosecuted. I think the Mueller report provides a roadmap to impeachment so that the president would be removed and be prosecuted.
You pushed for the impeachment vote last week. What's next? Are you going to continue pushing for this?
It's not my desire to. I didn't come to Congress to do what I'm doing now. But I find myself pushed into this position because I do understand the Constitution and I do understand what's happening in our country. And I love my country. This country means something to me. I believe in the ideals, and I want to make real those ideals and preserve them. And as a result, we have a president who has obstructed. We have a president who has infused bigotry into policy, and I don't think we can allow that to go unchecked. He already assumes that he has no boundaries. If we do nothing, he will know that he has no boundaries, and then only God knows what he will do.
Do you think if you were to put forward the vote on impeachment next week, there'd be more people supporting you than you had last week after today?
Well, I think that after the president defied Congress by having that rally and almost encouraging people to say, send her back, I think that there are many members of Congress who felt that that was quite disrespectful, given that we had just condemned him for that kind of behavior. So I think that there may be some other members of Congress who would contend that the president merits some additional sanctions above and beyond a condemnation. And the next sanction above that is impeachment.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.